Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being with us here today. Moving on to the last panel of the evening and the festival, we have with us Bina Sarkar alias Arshiya Lokhandwala and Asad Lalljee talking about the confluence of cultures in the city of New York in conjunction with the latest edition of the International Gallery magazine. I shall now quickly introduce our panelists. Bina Sarkar alias is the editor, publisher, and designer of International Gallery, the biannual Arts and Ideas magazine, founded by her in 1997 in Bombay. Engaged for many years in socio-political and community-building issues, which she addresses through the magazine, Bina received a fellowship in 2007 from the Asia Leadership Fellow Program, as well as the Japan Foundation. As poet, her poems have appeared in various magazines and anthologies, in addition to her own compilation titled The Room. Bina has also designed books as well as catalogues for several art exhibitions. Arshiya Lokhandwala, our next panelist, is an art historian, curator, and the founder of Lakire, a contemporary art gallery in Bombay, which she established in 1995. She has completed her PhD from Cornell University and is the recipient of the Charles Wallace India Trust Award in 2001 for an MA in Creative Curating at Goldsmiths College in London. She was also a participant at the Documenta 11 education program under the artistic curator Okwe Envezor. She has presented over 100 exhibitions in Indian contemporary art and has also held various teaching and research positions over the years. Asad Lalljee, who will be moderating the session, is the Senior Vice President of Avid Learning, a cultural CSR initiative of the SR Group that fosters creative learning in the fields of art, literature, and culture through curated programs. He is also the co-curator of the literature section of this year's Kalagoda Festival. He joined the SR Group after working in New York for 14 years in the advertising industry, and his portfolio here includes Avid Learning, the SR Foundation, Time Out Mumbai, and SR Corporate. Avid Learning was launched in 2009, and in the last 6 years, he has brought it to the forefront of India's cultural hub by developing opportunities and collaborations at several cultural platforms, such as Art Dubai, the Jaipur Literature Festival, and India Art Fair, among others. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. New York, a city so nice they named it twice. Thank you for joining us this lovely St. Valentine's Day. I see lots of people out here. Not really, but still. I'm very excited to actually do this panel with Bina and Arshiya, because having lived in New York for over a decade, this just reading the issue out here, and it brought back very many fond memories for me. So I'm excited to be here. And what we will do is, without further ado, just jump into the conversation. So I'm going to start with Bina. Bina, the latest issue of the International Gallery magazine is titled New York, New York, a confluence of cultures, and hence the title of this panel. This also marks the Mumbai launch of this wonderful publication. For those who don't have it, it's available for sale at the back, and we're going to take you through some images of this issue, which is, I believe, on loop now, or will be. So Bina, you've been bringing out this amazing publication for close to 2 decades. So why New York and why now? And also, if you could just take us through your curatorial process of how you chose the artists and practitioners that you actually presented in this publication.
Yes, for over 18 years, this is the 19th year of Gallery. The way the magazine, the journal evolved was from excellence in the arts and paying tributes to the arts to a keen interest in talking about cultural diversity, considering the way the world has been fragmenting every year. I felt it's important to talk about cultural diversity through the arts, to make people understand and appreciate diversity, respect diversity through the arts. And therefore, we've had issues like Afghanistan and Central Asia and Palestine, where people don't know much about these regions, but I wanted to talk about them. Like Afghanistan is not all Taliban. There's such a rich heritage of culture there, and you have to appreciate that. You have to appreciate the people. So this is how gallery has been evolving, and I do regions to talk about it holistically, the entire culture of the region, from the arts, performing arts, cinema, poetry, and that's how you understand and respect a region. New York happened because talking about diversity, and I end up in New York at least once every year. And I have a lot of multicultural friends there in the art world and otherwise. I thought it would be a good issue to give this perspective to New York City. New York, everybody knows, but I thought viewing it through this lens would be interesting. Especially like this image, for instance, it's part of a series of We Are You artists, and these are Latino artists who have been protesting about the way they've been marginalized by the US government. This is the cover image, and this speaks volumes about how difficult it is to be living in the US if you're not from there, if you're an immigrant, and how they've been discriminated against, and how important it becomes for one to be white in the US. Here we have Leela Pinto, who is interestingly an Indian artist who works on Wall Street, and she's also an artist, and this is one of the works that she has done on Wall Street. So this issue talks about Jayashree Abhichandani. She's another artist who does a lot of feminist work in New York City. And Shazia Sikandar, everybody's familiar with. She was on Times Square, which is quite an achievement, you know. For 10 days, I think, every night at midnight, her works came up on Times Square when I was there at that time. It was quite something. So Salman Toor is again a Pakistan artist who has been living there, and this is a tribute to Ginsberg. Ginsberg, of course, all of you know, is an iconic poet from New York. I've also written a tribute, a poem to Ginsberg in this issue, New York issue. So this is all about New York, and you will get the energy of New York through this issue, and if you read in depth, there's so much to know.
But how did you go, you know, like I went through the publication and I was trying to do the math for myself. Like I saw two Indian artists, a couple of Pakistanis, and across not just the visual arts, but you have, you know, you've covered literature, you've covered cinema. How did you decide, especially within the arts, I mean, how do you decide which to include, which is, because there's so much great stuff to choose from.
Indeed, with every issue it's the same. Right. With every issue there is so much out there to select from, and there's so much good work. It's just an intuitive decision, you know, to show a good span of work that's happening there, not necessarily only of the famous artists, but also those who are struggling and those who are doing good work, you know. So you don't have to be always famous to be in my journal, but you have to be someone who's doing meaningful work.
So I have hope I can be there one day.
Yes, Asad, indeed. Now look at Cheryl Dunn. She's an amazing photographer I met in New York, and she has captured these very, very, very special moments that speak so much. Her photography needs no explanation. You can move on. This is all her New York work, New York people. This tells you volumes of its cultural, socio-political situation. Erica Jong, she's in the persona section. I interviewed her because I mean, she's an iconic figure again. But we also wanted Preet Bharara, the Attorney General, who is such a strong figure in New York, an Indian who's fighting corruption in Parliament, in the government, and we wanted Preet Bharara and we wanted Bhairavi Desai, who's the union leader of the taxi union.
Yeah.
You know, somehow our timings were not working and we couldn't include them, and they wanted to be in the issue, but somehow it just didn't happen. But those are figures whom I would love to have presented, but unfortunately they're not there. But we have Salman, Suketu and Amitav. I was there during this conversation they had in New York. It's a very interesting discussion between the three of them, which is in the issue.
So moving on to Dr. Lokhandwala. So you want to go through the rest of the images?
No.
Yeah. So Arshiya, I know our 10 years in New York as New Yorkers overlapped for a short while. As an art historian, a critic, a curator, not a critic, but a curator, can you discuss how you approach curating shows in New York or for a New York audience? Is there something like a New York audience versus a global audience or the South Asian audience? And more specifically, in reference to your recent show, After Midnight, which has got rave reviews, and I believe you're in the process of bringing that to Mumbai?
Maybe not, but...
Maybe not. Ouch.
Firstly, thank you for inviting me, both of you, and congratulations on this issue. And just the fact that you have an issue on New York, unlike all the different regions, spells, the kind of richness New York as a city and the potential that it has in terms of cultural practice and history. For all those who've been there, New York is a very complex, city, and it's really difficult, it's challenging, and it's potentially very, very rich, very, very, very exciting, which is why we love it. Just coming back to something that you spoke about, the exhibition After Midnight, Indian Modernism to Contemporary India, which I curated at the Queen's Museum. So the Queen's Museum itself has a very particular history in New York. It's like the melting pot. It has people from all over the world, and it's really rich, and especially also the diaspora from India, Pakistan, and so they were very interested to do this project, which was this large-scale Indian exhibition. But also very challenging because in a sense, when you are in New York City and so much of the world has changed, one of the questions that I really asked myself, like, do I really want to do an Indian show? And what are the ways and the slippages that I can actually look at, because there is a mandate from the director of the museum that you have to have, so my show, should I just discuss it a bit?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, so the show After Midnight, Indian Modernism, it looked at two moments of Indian history, 1947, and I largely looked at the progressives, so 3 founding members and their close associates. So there were 8 of them, and the next moment that it looked at was 50 years of India's independence, 1997, which is a timeline that I've culled, which looks at when the globalization of art began. So artists started getting residencies and, including myself, curators going abroad, and this kind of influx of different influences. Just coming back to something very important that, what I kind of earmarked in this exhibition is the progressives. They all had a, very strong relationship with New York. And my exhibition 1950 to 1970 examines New York and the influence that New York had on these artists. So for example, Tayyab Mehta saw Barnett Newman's work first. We had Sousa who did the first Chemical. So like it kind of looked at New York as a zeitgeist, and what got produced over there, and the importance of the city. And I also showed all modernist works from New York collections. What's very interesting is because of the auctions and the circuit, that there were such important and amazing works in New York that I could actually color exhibition.
Okay.
So so coming back to the whole reception of this, and so 3 years before the exhibition, I did a think tank whether I really wanted to do a show which was India specific, and what are the ways that I can actually dismantle this whole proposition. So the progressive section that I did kind of looked at internationalism, because pretty much in the 1950s or as early as 1949, we had Sousa, Raza, Ram Kumar, all kind of moving away. So when you're looking at the history and the baggage of modernism, it's not necessarily Indian at that particular perspective. So it was looking outwards. For example, M.F. Hussain did his first, international solo show in Zurich as early as 1952. There was a Venice Biennale. So these artists were so international already. And interestingly, in the 1950s, Paris was the city. Every artist wanted to go to Paris. But in the 1960s, it became New York. And you saw the transition, because you had all these 8 artists who got the Rockefeller Scholarship or were there for some reason or the other, except for F.N. Sousa, who were in New York, challenged the city, got a lot out of it. And, so that's what I kind of looked at.
So just jumping off that point to both of you all, I mean, why is New York so successful? Why is it now or continues to be the epicenter or the cultural hub of the world?
I think you are qualified more to talk about that, because you were there for 10 years. We're just passengers, who come and go. But definitely the city has, for me, a magnetic quality, just as Bombay has. I think there is something very similar between the two cities. So I think that magnetic quality is what really lures you to the city, and the excellence in creativity that you find there. I really, it's like concentrated, excellence in creativity that you find in New York City.
Arshiya, do you want to?
I think it's largely because of the institution. So for example, we have the kind of museums, which are like very, very important cultural magnets. We have the MoMA, the Guggenheim, that have like a larger kind of international global program. Then you have...
I can't see, sorry. You'll have to wait till the end, ma'am. Thank you.
Well, I think the same kind of repertoire is there for, all kinds of cultural practice. You have the Metropolitan Museum of Art. You have also the opera, so like the diverse art forms kind of coming together, and you can see everything. So when you are in New York, it's super exciting. You can have, ethnic food, and then go to the opera, and then, go to art galleries, and this is where the art world, in terms of the contemporary art world, is also concentrated. So there is so much to see. It also, in terms of art criticism, there's a lot going on, and of course also the institutions. You have Columbia, you have so a lot of it's pretty gritty, it's exciting, it's critical, it's happening, and I guess they say if you make it in New York, you can make it anywhere, and maybe that isn't at some...
all my lines for my presentation.
At some level, it's very true, and I just want to come back to something, and this is many years ago. Geeta Kapoor actually spoke about it, that if you really want to make it as an artist in India, you need to be elsewhere, you need to be in New York, and if you're accepted there, then India accepts you. And I think, interestingly, things are changing, and and this is speaking about Bombay and the city, and I feel that what we have here is really, really interesting, and we have a lot of people who are from overseas who want to come here and be part of this, because here's where the action is as well. So yeah.
You just mentioned, and maybe I didn't catch that, is in 1960s you think was the turning point when New York started becoming and you don't think like earlier on in the 20s when, you know, when the MoMA came up and when, you know, things like jazz. I mean, we're not talking only arts right now because it's the confluence of arts and cultures. We have to broaden the conversation as directed by the lady out here. You know, jazz was in the 1920s somewhere. So you still think that the significance and the importance of New York as this epicenter, you know, firstly the US started getting importance, I think, post the 20s, 30s?
Yeah.
And with the birth of jazz or the MoMA coming up, which was, I think, a significant step. That goes back to, and you know, the thing you mentioned about the institutions, that was another point that I wanted to draw a lot on, you know, specifically for Bina, because you've been going to New York, as I read somewhere, over 30 years, starting with your uncle. And so have you seen this infrastructure grow? Have you seen it? Because, you know, Arshiya mentioned all the physical institutions, but there's also money. You know, somewhere I've just read that the Department of Cultural Affairs, which is part of the New York City, gives the most amount of money, even more than NISCA, which is part of the federal. And in New York, you also have a lot of private and collaborative funding that's available, which obviously lends itself to having an infrastructure, because that's what you need is money.
It's very competitive as well.
Yeah,
you know that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
We've written grounds that we've
Yeah.
just written. But Bina, have you seen this change over the past, you know, you've been visiting New York over the past 30 years. Have you seen the...
It's over 30 years, I've witnessed just the same vibrancy. You know, I can say today as I did 30 years ago. It was as vibrant then. I mean, now a younger generation has come in, but it was always magnetic, always.
Sure.
Yeah, I always found that. I mean, we used to go gallery crawling and bar crawling and all that 30 years ago, and we used to listen to the most amazing music and watch off-Broadway theatre. Off-Broadway theatre is really big there, and we would watch theatre in a chapel, or you know, all kinds of interesting spaces, which is there even today. You know, that's what makes the city so exciting.
Right.
May I jump in?
Sure.
So I think New York has changed a lot, and I can just say that because the first time actually I was going to Cornell, I was on the Staten Island ferry, and 9/11 actually happened in front of me, and I saw what it did to the city, and the city kind of really crumble and shake, and how the cultural politics of place completely changed, and this whole thing of the otherness kind of shift. And moving on, pretty much 2004, 2005, when globalization took place in India, you could see the effect, and how, for example, you were treated as an Indian in the US had also changed. There was a certain respectability, there was a certain interest, and several artists actually, because the market locally was booming so much, and talking about how tied we are to Bombay and New York, they were actually invited by, you know, top-notch Chelsea galleries to, you know, show their portfolios, which was something which had never happened. So there was such an interest in India, and so it's all to do with capitalism. And I mean, I think New York has also changed a lot because of post 9/11, and you know, so this whole globalization, and then 2008 happened when again the market kind of dipped, and so it's a city that's constantly, I think, renegotiating and, you know, and changing, but I think it's very tight, again, to the whole idea of what is happening in the larger world space. So,
Yeah, I feel within the flux, of course, there is always a change, there is a flux, but within that, I feel New York has remained steadfast as a city of multiculturalism.
Yes.
You know, and if you're talking about the other or racism that could have been felt earlier, it's there even today. Even black Americans
Totally.
have a tough time even today.
Yeah.
In all of the US and in New York also, we know instances all the time. So there is change and there is no change as well, you know.
But how does this diversity kind of be a stimuli for creativity? Because, you know, we're looking at the arts. I mean, you know, New York is the least American of all cities in the US. I mean, I think 38% of the people are born abroad. I mean, they speak
Yeah,
multiple
mostly
languages.
migrants. I
Yeah.
mean, all of the America
Yeah.
actually is all migrants, which is what.
But New York per se is more.
Yeah,
the more.
more. It's a concentration of immigration community, which is what makes it so rich culturally.
Yeah.
You know.
I think it's also so many different people kind of living together.
Yeah.
Though there are certain ghettos even in New York, like in Brooklyn
of
and
course.
like different places.
I mean, there's an India ghetto, there's a Sri Lanka ghetto, there's a all kinds of African
Chinatown.
ghetto. Sorry,
Chinatown.
Chinatown. Yes,
it's the largest Chinatown in the world, right?
Yes,
Just wanted to touch on actually something that, and you mentioned Jayashree, Abhi Chandani. And so just talking about, even though New York has so many opportunities in terms of museums, galleries, it's still extremely difficult in terms of the art world. For example, an Indian artist, unless they are Subodh Gupta of that caliber, to have galleries and representation. And, so it's great that she did, the South Asia kind of community, where it's also necessary to kind of representation for a kind of quorum kind of coming together to, represent the women or, the diasporic women who, Chitra Ganesh and all have been, kind of part of. But it's tough. It's really tough. It's competitive. It's a fantastic city because if you can make it like Shazia Sikandar, just coming there at the right time, so it's all about reception. It's about, it's a large play field. It's exciting, but it's also...
Did you read my notes? Because that was my next point about the community for artists.
I did. I thought you were just going to have this general
it's also
conversation.
It's also a very open city. They're open to embrace new ideas. I feel much more than India or Bombay. They're much more open out there. In fact, there's one organization called Pen and Brush. Do you know about Pen and Brush? It's a 122 years old organization run by women, and out of nowhere they got in touch with me and asked me to curate a show for them, which I did. And this was about 5 years ago, and since then they've been in touch, and they're one of my most amazing supporters from New York. They call me for talks, they're constantly engaging with me. So who am I? I'm actually nobody, but they are, they have kind of identified me out of nowhere, and they have sort of, embraced my work and supported me. So this is what I find unique about.
I think there's a generosity. There's an openness.
There is a generosity of spirit.
Yes, totally.
And an open-mindedness. They don't. Many of them I find don't live in camps or ghettos like we do here. They're much more open there.
Can we talk a little bit about the diaspora? You mentioned a bit, you've looked at, and we broadened this conversation more than the arts because I think the publication covers all of it.
Yes.
And you've alluded to, I think it was an IAC event that Suketu and Salman.
Suketu, Salman and Amitabh.
And I mean,
Kumar.
they're Suketu, Salman, maybe Meera Nair, they all, created a space for themselves at the top as Indian diaspora. And, is their success, is it attributed to being in New York, or is there...
No, I think their success is attributed to their work, which is excellent.
Okay.
There's no doubt about their work. All three of them are, of course, Salman out of the three of them is the most iconic figure. Sure. But I think their work demands the appreciation they get.
You worked with any of them?
Not really.
In the artists?
No, but I saw them kind of hanging out in New York, which was very cool. But yeah, so it's of course they are in their spaces, and I mean, they're occupying and doing what they have. But I don't know. I agree with you. It's nothing to do with
voices.
the city.
They're good voices. They're always talking about the different cultural and socio-political situation, whether it's New York or Bombay. Salman is going to write a book on New York now, his next book.
That's interesting.
And Suketu, who's written Maximum City, is now writing a series of short stories based in New York. It's very interesting. And Amitabh Kumar, the third person, he teaches at this University,
yeah.
and he's also an author, and so the discussion about New York between the three of them was very interesting, which you will read in this issue.
But just speaking of IAC, where this conversation happened, I think that's, having organizations like that, I think that's about 12 or 14 years old. We all know Arun Shivdasani, and we've all, in our New York tenure, I was her literary director. I used to volunteer and do all her book launches, and my wife used to write all her grants, so actually still writes all her grants. But it's really nice to have that sort of a ecosystem or a platform where Indian talent or South Asian talent is kind of presented across genres, not just the arts, but cinema and literature. I think that's also part of the reason, and I'm not saying the Suketus and Salmans are not successful, but she is doing
Arun
her part to put them in the
Shivdasani
mainstream.
is doing a lot of good work there, but there are several such institutions.
In New York?
In New York, what's good over there is they are patronized by, you can't survive without grant givers, and you have grant givers there who are unlike grant givers in India, who will give you a grant because they believe in your work, and they're not always looking for what will I get in return. They just recognize good work and they want to support it, which I think is very generous.
So, just moving along, last month Avid hosted Steve McCurry in a conversation, and which marked his book launch. So, this question is for both of you all. Tell me, some, or maybe for you it's going to be easy, Arshiya, some of your favorite New York artists, and how the ones especially that their work represents the city.
Actually, we are carrying Steve McCurry.
I know, I read it,
but we're carrying Cuba, I think. Not New York. He wanted to share. Maybe he just wanted to project that series of work, which is what he gave me. But I do think Cheryl Dunn, whose work is here, is very good, and Jamal Shabazz. He's another. He's a very respected photographer in New York. He's a Black American whose work is also in the issue, which is very good. But there's several such. I mean, James Nachtwey, whom I have shown before. He's a war photographer. His work is excellent. I showed him in a previous issue of Gallery. That is what I'm saying. There's such an amazing concentration of excellent work emerging out of New York City.
I think also what's very interesting, because I was looking through your magazine, and you kind of really picked up on artists who are from different parts of the world who really made it in New York, and where New York is their home. So there are many of them, like Lee Bull, Shahzad Sikandar, other people. So for them, New York presents an opportunity to kind of, contextualize their work in a particular way, and, they really had the opportunity to kind of make it big and explore it. So I think that's really interesting, because it really shows the diversity of the city and how, for example, the role that New York has actually played. So I think that was really enjoyable. I mean, there are too many actually to even talk about. I can't think of anybody at the top of my head.
That's why she didn't want the rapid fire questions.
I'm like, don't examine me about the city, but you can ask me other questions.
All right. So, the New York photographer and blogger Brandon Stanton, created the initiative Humans of New York, which turned up. It started off as a New York thing, which has now become
Humans of New York.
I mean, it's become a movement. I mean, now there are versions of it cropping up all around the world. There's Humans of
he's
Bombay.
all over. Have any of you seen Humans of New York? Yeah, he's the reason why I didn't carry him was because he's everywhere, and I thought everyone knows about Brandon Stanton, so I didn't carry his work. But yes, it's a movement. His work is a movement.
Do you see any other trends, movements, any centers that's kind of coming out of New York that's going to kind of help keep New York in that epicenter of creativity or cool stuff happening, essentially? Anything else?
I'm afraid I'm not able to zero in on movements because I don't spend enough time there. I think because when I go there, it's usually just for a week. So there's not that much one can do in that 1 week. You should know better.
I haven't been there for 5 years.
You've lived there.
I've visited. But
If I can just say this one thing, and I
Yeah.
mean, it's not really new, but it's kind of the gentrification that the arts, like the galleries, have kind of brought about in New York. So we've seen it in Soho, and it became this very shishi, neighborhood, and where the prices went crazy, and then people moved to Chelsea, and now that's become overpriced. People have moved to Brooklyn. So I think the arts, I mean, have really done it. So like neighborhoods which were really kind of broken down, and have really kind of bloomed, blossomed. Real estate has happened. So it's kind of interesting that the art kind of has shaped, real estate in New York. In a lot of ways. Now it's kind of moving on to Brooklyn, even all the way to Red Hook, which is pretty much at the back. So
Even
the
Harlem.
art, Harlem, but
yeah.
actually not for galleries. Harlem has re-gentrified in itself, but not in terms of like cultural
galleries,
institutions.
yes.
Yeah. But it's amazing what's happening there, and so I mean, whenever I go to New York, I live in Harlem, and my friend is black, and suddenly a building is taken over with all these white people, and the prices have shot up. So it's kind of crazy what's kind of going on, but that is also part of the city, and it's also exciting.
very nice. So as you all both said, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, even today I know people, a lot of people who want to move to New York just to be in the buzz of things, but it's not that easy. Real estate is really high in New York. It's much higher than Bombay.
So what I want to say is it's really kind of quite difficult, and we have, for example, when you look at the case of which is a very problematic term, nevertheless, diaspora artists, or for example, Chitra Ganesh, and I mean, they have like larger opportunities in India and other places than New York. It's a really hard city, it wears them, and also it kind of becomes a little exhausting sometimes to wear this label of otherness. You just want to be an artist, and you don't want your practice to be always relegated to, feminist and kind of South Asian kind of agenda. And sometimes that baggage is too much, and so there is New York, but if you are Indian, there's no way this tag of you can't be un-Indian in that sense. So it's there, it's exciting, it's accepting, but you are othered, and that's something for real. I mean, we need to live with it. How much ever we love it, So.
But that's now. I mean, now because there are these opportunities in India, like 20 years ago, it wasn't the case. That to be in New York would be I'm just talking from my perspective. I worked in advertising, and it was my dream to work on Madison Avenue, and it was so difficult to get there. First of all, there were no desis in there. There were no visa regulations. No one was wanting to talk to you because you didn't have a green card or something. But once you get in there, I mean, and you're capable, I think you're at power. Yeah, the stereotypes that you have to keep, proving yourself. I mean, I used to have all these questions, really ridiculous questions, as do you have peacocks in your backyard? And when you're getting married, Asad, we want to come for a monsoon wedding. I said, no one gets married in monsoons. And then the other day, a few years ago, someone told me, I thought of you the other day, I saw Slumdog Millionaire. I said, but why would you think of me? So,
Actually, when I was interviewing Krishan Khanna for the exhibition, and he was there pretty much in the 60s, he was one of the first artists to actually get the Rockefeller grant and go there, and he was talking to me how open people were, and people bought his work it didn't really matter that it was Indian, and and the kind of dialogue that he had was very rich. It was very open, and the kind of layerings that we are seeing now, in terms of ethnicity and all, it was very, very different then. But maybe there were moments.
I still experience this openness, even when I go now. I experience this openness.
No, I do too. I mean, it's not, it's there, but I mean, there's a lot of other cultural baggage as well. And we love New York, and we are, so it's definitely an exciting open city, but yeah.
So should we open it up to questions, or should I do my rapid round fire with you guys now?
Okay, there's a very strong...
Yes.
My question is to you. I noticed that you covered Woody Allen in your magazine, as declared by you on the screen. Woody Allen has been accused of pedophile.
Yes,
and
I know.
He has served a term and is getting the 3rd degree socially. Putting him in your magazine, are you saying something to us?
No. Of course, like anyone else, I would condemn what he did. I do condemn what he did, but I also recognize his creativity. Okay, because of what he has done, I cannot erase the creativity in him. You understand? They're two different things. If I see the man, I will speak my mind, because of course, I do not appreciate what he's done, but I do appreciate his history of work, creative work.
Yeah, this is question.
My featuring him does not condone his misdeeds.
Yeah.
A question for Arshiya. You said that you mentioned the gentrification of New York, and it's absolutely true. But I think people are not moving all the way out of New York, they're moving outside the city. So the artists are moving to Chicago, they're moving to more livable places.
Yeah.
And I think the investment banking world has gentrified New York to such an extent that it has become impossible now for creative people to live there.
No, it's completely true.
Yeah.
And what I meant also by the gentrification, I was also referring to the location where the galleries were. So Soho, Chelsea, and of course, it's like super expensive for artists, and that's just what the city is. It's completely true. Yeah. Well, it's there. I mean, it's there. I mean, few people move out, but that's the law of life. That happens. So, I mean, that's the spirit of city. It's gritty, it's hard, you got to dig, and you got to be there and just make it happen. And so if you're not there, and then that's gone, you're done. So that's life.
Okay, since Arshiya spoke about the grit of New York, let me. I write
the magazine?
I write all my poems in many of my poems in my telephone. I may be at the airport or wherever, and I start writing. So here's one poem for New York. Actually, it's for Ginsberg. This is about the grit that you're talking about. Like the throb of your pulse, neons flash at Times Square. Like a thud in your chest, the delirious city lays bare its quotidian fever of lost souls and Wall Street wolves in their lair. A homeless man wails gospel songs, a bassoon bellows beneath the subway stair. Eyes smudged with crack, a teen queen drawls, while a cop swaggers with a sinister air. There's grime and grit, there's soul and swing, there's a hard rock high, there's a naked dare. New York is Ginsberg's prayer. Thank you.
All right, lovely.
So with that, if we don't have any questions, I'm going to ask you all, thank you for coming, and ask you all to go buy the publication, which is right at the back there. Thank you, and go celebrate Valentine's Day now.
Thank you very much.